Hi everyone, this is David from the Long Game LSAT, and today we're going to be going over sufficient versus necessary. This is one of the most important skills you should know when you're taking the LSAT, is being able to differentiate between a sufficient condition and a necessary condition. So first of all, we need to talk about what a conditional actually is. So a conditional is any statement that looks like this. It says, if this happens, then this will happen. I'll give you guys an example. If you're an NBA player, then we can conclude a bunch of things about you. Maybe you're rich, maybe you're tall, right? You're definitely going to be tall if you're an NBA player. So conditional statements work like this. When you have the first part, then the assumption is you have the second part. That works in two different ways though. It's going to work in two different ways, and we call these two different ways sufficient and necessary. So let's go over sufficient first. These conditionals let us know what will guarantee the conclusion. So let's use the same example. If you're in the NBA, then you're tall. We know that everyone who is in the NBA, we can automatically conclude that they are tall. But there might be a bunch of people that are tall that aren't in the NBA, right? Being in the NBA isn't necessary to being tall. It's just going to guarantee that you are tall. Now let's take a look at necessary. The most common way they'll signify a necessary condition is by saying only if. So we can say that only if you're tall are you in the NBA. Only people who are tall enough to make it to the NBA are going to actually be there. Now, imagine, so I'm tall, right? But does that mean I'm automatically going to be in the NBA? No, right? It's just a requirement. So one other way to differentiate between these conditionals is by taking the reverse. So let's say that you are tall, and this is a sufficient condition. If you're tall, and we don't really know anything about whether or not you're in the NBA, because all we know is that if you're in the NBA, then you must be tall, but not anything about just tall people. We can't conclude anything. And we also can't conclude anything if you're not in the NBA. If you're not in the NBA, then we can't conclude, oh, then you must not be tall, because there are a bunch of people that are not in the NBA and yet they are tall. So again, we can't conclude this. All sufficient conditions tell us are what will guarantee the conclusion, not what's necessary, not what we will not be able to get with our conclusion, nothing like that. In order to get something similar to that, we would need to create a necessary condition. So imagine if only if you're tall, then you're in the NBA, then we can conclude, well, if you're not tall, then you must not be in the NBA, precisely because you are missing the required component of being in the NBA. Now, let's say you're not in the NBA. Does that mean that you're not tall? No, right? There might be a bunch of different reasons why you're not in the NBA, and yet you are tall, or sure, you're not tall and that's why you're in the NBA. But just because you're not in the NBA, we can't conclude that you are or are not tall. So in order to practice this a little bit more, let's go through this question. First of all, try to figure out which type of conditional are we talking about. Then think about, okay, well, if it's sufficient, then this means that we're just getting the conclusion to be guaranteed. And if it's necessary, then we know what's required for the conclusion. And once you have that, the question should become a lot easier. So if you want to do this by yourself, feel free to pause the video. All right, so let's go through it. So we start off by saying that if a film is accepted by the festival committee, then one of the distributors attending the film will buy it. So we can say that if a film is accepted, then the distributors will buy it. Let's keep on going. So if a distributor buys a film, so we start off the second conditional with the conclusion of the first. So we have if A, then B. If B, then the film's financial backers are assured of recouping their investment. So if B, then R. We can basically say if A, then R, because if we have A, if it gets accepted, then a festival will buy it. And if a festival buys it, then the director will recoup their loss. So if A, then R. Then we say that this film was not accepted by the festival committee. Okay, so which part are we missing? Well, we don't have our A. So this is the sign for not, so not A. And then if we don't have A, do we have B? Well, that depends, right? It depends on whether or not this is a sufficient or a necessary condition. So if it's a sufficient condition, not having the A doesn't really do anything to whether or not the festival will buy it. Since having a film be accepted by the festival will guarantee that a festival buys it, or that a director will buy it. But that's just one way for a director to buy it. There's a bunch of other ways, because this is only a sufficient condition. It's letting us know what's going to guarantee something to happen, not what's going to be required for something else to happen, right? It's like saying, if you're an NBA player, you're definitely tall, right? You're guaranteed to be tall. Compare that to a necessary condition, which is more like, well, if you're going to be an NBA player, you have to be tall, right? That's something that's required. In this case, not having the A, right, not being accepted, doesn't really tell us much as to whether or not there's going to be a B, whether or not a director is actually going to buy it or not. So I really hope they don't say, well, they're not going to buy the film, therefore they're not going to recoup their losses. And that's exactly what they end up doing. So this is a flawed reasoning, because just because we don't have the sufficient condition here doesn't mean there's not another way that another director will buy the film. So a director can still buy the film even though it's not accepted by the festival committee. And if another director buys the film, then we know then the losses are assured of being recouped. And even if we don't have the director buying the film, we could still just recoup the losses through some other way, because that is another sufficient condition, right? So now we're asked to find which flawed pattern of reasoning is most similar. And so if you want to go through the answer choices one more time, feel free to pause the video right now. All right, let's go through it. If a film has a good story, it will be praised by critics. Okay, that matches our first statement pretty well. I'd recommend you guys not write this stuff down, but I would try to keep a mental image of the conditionals and how they look like in your head to be able to try to match them on these flawed pattern of reasoning types of questions where they're asking you to match. But right now, off to a good start with A. If a film is praised by critics, that's good because we continue the first conclusion being the first premise, just like in the stimulus, right? If a film is praised by critics, it will do well at the box office. Okay, I'm not going to read the rest of it. I'm looking for something that then says, this film does not have a good story. Do we get that? No. We get, this film did not do well at the box office. Nope. The reason I'm looking for if this film does not have a good story is to match with this sentence right here. Because what we don't have is this first premise, right? That first beginning part of the if-then statement. So A is out. All right, let's take a look at B now. B says, if a film features several stars, it will be successful at the box office. All right, that's a pretty straightforward sufficient condition. That matches. Now we need something that starts with the conclusion of the first conditional, right? If a film is successful at the box office. A box office success has a long run at theaters. So notice how this isn't exactly in the if-then format, but it kind of is. It's just saying if it's a box office success, so I'll put BOS, then it will have a long run at theaters. I'll put long, right? It's just not giving it to you exactly in that format, but don't let that dissuade you. It's the same idea, right? A box office success will have a long run at theaters, all right? That works because we're starting off with the conclusion of the first. Now we need something that says this film does not have several stars. which is exactly what we get. This film features only 1 star. Perfect. Now we need something that says, okay, this film will not have a long run at theaters. So it will not have a long run at theaters. B is the correct answer. Let's get rid of all of the other ones. All right, let's move on to C. C says, if a film is directed by a talented artist, it will be praised by critics. So far, so good. This is a sufficient condition. I need this next one to say, if it's praised by critics, which it does, it will do well on video. Sure, we don't know what this one's going to be, right? It could be something completely different, and it is. This film did well on video. No, that's still wrong, because I want something that here that says, this film was not directed by a talented artist, so C is out as well. If a film, so D, if a film is a box office success, then one of its stars is nominated for an award. Sure, it's a sufficient condition. If a star receives an award, receiving an award and being nominated are 2 different things, so D is out. E says, if a film has a big budget, it will be heavily promoted. A heavily promoted film will be released all over the country. That's good. We have 2 sufficient conditions, with the second one starting with the conclusion of the first one. This film has a big budget. No, because I want something that says this film does not have a big budget. All right, now that we've gone over E, we can go back, pick B, and yes. I'm pretty sure, okay, yes, it is going to be B. So if you want more tutoring like this, if you want to go over sufficient versus necessary, feel free to go into the description of this video and book a session with me.